So I just thought, there's not much of like a real collection of the lore for Zuma online. So I was like, I figured I might as well share that with all of you. And ultimately, it was more important for him to be in the game than to be himself in the game. Really, he would rather be immortalized in a world that he created than have him truly be himself in that world that he created. And I think that's really fascinating. And I don't know what I would do in his situation. I don't know what I would pick. He's not that he's on the level of like an Aristotle or like a Socrates, but, and not to claim he is, but there are a lot of similarities there. What type of person he meant, but I think we all know who he meant. So I'll let you guys all, I guess, ponder on that. But we're all thinking the same type of person, and I wouldn't want them playing my games either. When he got into, I shouldn't say it like a general knowledge, because this is actually a little bit more obscure in the Zuma fan base. He got into a very bad car crash, Simon Thomas, in 2008. So Zuma, as a frog, he's depicted as a frog, but he is actually a real human. Like bowling. Like, how there's like obviously, well, I'm not trying to say like, the person in bowling shoots the balls, like, cause like duh. But you know how for children they have like a little like slide for the bowling ball. You just put it on the slide, you line up the slide, and you slide it. That is what this is based off of. Abruptly like slammed on the brakes, and the tube kept going forward, and Zuma was flung out of it, and he slammed into the back of the Sea-Doo. A lot of people like the lore of this one better, just because when you understand it, it is when you understand like all of Simon Thomas, it's like if you watch like the final episode of a show, maybe like the finale of like Breaking Bad. It's like if you watch the like playing Zuma but not knowing about Simon Thomas is kind of like if you watched the finale of Breaking Bad and that was your entire experience. But learning about Simon Thomas's life kind of is like the driving factor of like Zuma lore almost. So like learning about that, there's no race. He's already like 50. Like, you shouldn't be having kids at that age because they're more likely to be born disabled or whatever. I'm sure he wouldn't mind adopting. If someone is so clearly not in the right that everybody can agree that they're in the wrong, it doesn't matter if I speak on it anyway, because I'm not going to change people's opinions, Like, the people that somehow think it's justified are never going to change their mind. And that's one of the things I don't like about debates, mostly about subjective things. Okay, I think it's working. So we're just gonna play some Zuma. There we go. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Zuma video. Okay, let me turn my desktop audio down a little bit first. I don't even know if I'm allowed to tab out of the game. I don't know if it likes when I tab out. Where's turn my desktop audio down to like half. Okay, yeah. And even then, I'm gonna turn the music down to about there. I can just turn that down too. I can go ahead and do that. Okay, so I used to play Zuma a lot back in the day, and I decided, I found it on sale for like $1 on my Steam, and the sale was ending in like 2 hours. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna buy Zuma, and I remember a lot of the lore. So I just thought, there's not much of like a real collection of the lore for Zuma online. So I was like, I figured I might as well share that with all of you. And it's gonna be kind of hard to multitask, but hold on. I love this game a lot, and I was like, I played it a lot as a kid. I was like, I figured I may as well share it with everybody. So obviously this is the titular frog. His name is Zuma, as you might have guessed. He's actually Zuma Jr. His father was also named Zuma. It's a not a particularly long story. It's just his mother and his father always had a great relationship, and they were like, when we have our son, we're just gonna name it after you, Dad. It was kind of like that. Where there's a lot of time when there's like a junior situation, there's a lot more story to it. Not in this case. It really just was my mother Zuma, father Zuma love each other very much. I'm loving this game. I'm loving it already. I haven't played it in a long time, so hopefully I'm not like bad at it or anything. But the creator of this game, Simon Thomas, he was very fascinated with frogs in his childhood. I think a part of it was he lived in I think it was Louisiana. So he was always in like, bog environments. You go out with your friends, you play some games in the down in the bayou, and there were lots of frogs there, and so he would always be out capturing frogs and stuff, and just doing general hijinks. I thought it was oh, whoops, I didn't mean to put that there. I thought that was really cool to learn because a lot of times it really is just that simple. I think with Pokemon it's the same thing with the creator, like collecting frogs and bugs as a kid, and he made a game where he could mess around with frogs and bugs and all types of creatures. This game is just Simon Thomas wanted to mess around with some creatures, and the creature he chose was frogs. And it's kind of an interesting game because there's lots of games that have lore, obviously, but lots of them with lore have multiple characters. Really, Zuma is one of the only characters in this game. There is that man that you saw in the opening, I guess not the opening scene, on the menu of the game, right? That is actually the representation of Simon Thomas. That is like his self-insert kind of, and he has dialogue with Zuma in some of the endings of the game that kind of make it a lot clearer. Like, it reveals a lot about the story. I don't know if we're going to get there, and I don't know if we're going to finish the game with a high enough score to unlock that ending. That's one of the main things, because you really need to play very well to get those endings. But in some of the endings, it does shed some light on both the creation of the game and just into the mind of Simon Thomas, because we don't know very much about him. There isn't much online about him. If you look him up, his Wikipedia page is pretty empty. All it shows is that he's the creator of Zuma, obviously creator of the second Zuma game. I believe it's Revenge of Zuma or something. I don't remember exactly, but he's a very interesting character. And as the video goes on, I'll try to shed some light on him, but also try to fully capture him as a person, because there's a lot about him as like a character. He is a character in the game, but there's when you look into how he is as a person, it's different, right? Not everybody is like the same person in every iteration of themselves, kind of. It's like when you talk to your mom, you're not the same person as when you talk to your best friend. And maybe you are. For me, I feel like I'm pretty similar. But for Simon Thomas, he would go on record saying that the character he plays in Zuma is kind of different from him as a person, and he always felt that there was a bit of a disconnect there. And so hopefully I can do him as a person justice while also doing him as a character justice. That's something I hadn't really considered when going into the video. I was just like, let's shoot some balls, play some Zuma, have some fun. But I also do want to pay respects to the creator and to Zuma himself. I'll do a bit more background on Zuma, his relationship with his parents, how he got to where he is here, because he didn't just everything happens for a reason. He didn't just happen to be here, type thing. That was a good combo there. It was an accidental combo, but nonetheless, every combo is a combo in this game. And the reason for combos in general, the reason why it's a thing that exists, is pretty interesting too. So Simon Thomas was studying abroad, right? I believe it was either Latvia or Lithuania. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head, but he was studying abroad somewhere in that area. It could also be Liechtenstein. And he all the time would go play bowling with friends. And they had in the bowling alleys there, they had a special system where if you could input your own custom rules. It's kind of like, how you play Uno and there's like house rules. It was kind of like that. And I thought that was really fascinating. That's something I honestly wish they had here in Canada. They would have like a thing where they would have, if you had like a streak of points going on, there would be an amplifier and your points would like raise exponentially with your streak. And that's just really cool. And I thought using that as like a baseline for how the game should work, it's a genius idea. It really is genius. It shows the creative mind of Simon Thomas. I'm sorry, but like really, it's just such a clever idea. It's like when you're creating games, when you're creating anything. I'm a writer. I like to write. You have to draw inspiration from like real things that have happened, kind of, right? And I think that's just it's really, really cool. I wouldn't have expected that. And then when you look into it, it's really, really interesting. All the things you can see about both the creator and the creation of the game, because they are two different things. Let me just go ahead and finish this one here. There we go. So that you see the man up there, that is Simon Thomas, or a representation of him. He does look pretty similar to the character, But as I mentioned earlier, he does feel a bit of a disconnect between the real him and the character at times. And I think part of it is that Simon Thomas, the character, is very, I wouldn't say authoritarian, but he makes his presence known in a way that he doesn't in real life, because in real life he is really shy of a person. He's not the guy that, like, when you walk into a room of, like, the greatest game designers ever, he's not the one that's like, yo, look at me. He's not the one talking. He's more of an observer. Whereas in this game, he has to kind of be that guy because Zuma lost his ability to speak prior to the creation of the game. So Zuma is unable to speak, and he can't say much anymore. He used to be able to speak. I will get into that as the time rises. Currently, I'm talking about Simon Thomas, but yeah, he feels a disconnect between him and the character, because in the character he kind of has to be the one to be leading the dialogue because Zuma can't speak anymore. And so for Simon Thomas, it's a contrast to how he is in real life, because in real life he doesn't have that, right? He's not that guy. He's put into a position where he has to be somebody he's not in the game. And ultimately, that comes down to it. It was a choice that Simon Thomas had to make. Is if I want to be in this game, am I going to sacrifice who I am as a person to do it? And ultimately, it was more important for him to be in the game than to be himself in the game. Really, he would rather be immortalized in a world that he created than have him truly be himself in that world that he created. And I think that's really fascinating. And I don't know what I would do in his situation. I don't know what I would pick, type thing, because you want to stay true to yourself, but you also, the entire reason for living is really to make a name for yourself and to be remembered after your death. And so, it might be advantageous in the minds of many people to, just blanket term be remembered, like, I guess the question arises, if there was something that you could do right now where you would be remembered forever, but nobody would really know, they wouldn't remember the real you, it would just be a blanket term, you being remembered, would you do it? And for me, I don't know, but clearly for Simon Thomas, he thought long and hard about it, and his answer was yes. So here we are on we were on the last time, but I neglected to mention, we are on the second stage. There are 6 stages in Zuma, and there are 7 deadly sins. Right, we all know the 7 deadly sins. I don't have to go through all of them. But the one that's missing is pride. And that's because through interviews with Simon Thomas, you find out that in his mind, in Zuma as a person, outside of the game also, because Zuma, I don't know how many people know, but Zuma is real. Zuma did exist. There is records of his existence, so he's a real person. Zuma was not the greatest of guys, the greatest of frogs. He got into a lot of fights. He had a lot of problems with a lot of people. But throughout all of it, one thing that Simon Thomas said is he never ever exemplified any pride. He was always really humble. He was always really down to earth, and that's something Simon Thomas really appreciated about him, is because he could stoop down to the lowest of lows. But what would never happen is he would never be prideful in a prideful manner. He would never do anything of the sort that would, insinuate that he was better than anybody else. He was just like everybody else. He had faults, but pride was never one of his faults. So Simon Thomas made a really big point in interviews. He was like, I never wanted to paint Zuma as somebody he was not, because his own character, Simon Thomas in the game, had to be different from who he was in real life. He didn't want both characters to be different, right? He wanted them to. It's like if one of them was going to be correct, he wanted it to be Zuma. And I think that speaks a lot about Simon Thomas, because I think a lot of people would have been like, well, if one of us has to be represented in the wrong light, I want it to be the other guy. He took that burden himself. He didn't let it be Zuma, because he would rather himself be shown in the improper light than for Zuma, who, they were pretty good friends, but ultimately it was a business relationship, right? So I think that was that was really really bold, really brave of Simon Thomas to do. And again, you see him up here. He is of Samoan descent. That's why he has he has a vaguely Samoan face. He's half Samoan, Simon Thomas, but he grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and at a young age, I believe it was, 7 or 8, he moved to Louisiana, as I mentioned earlier, and the contrast between Albuquerque and Louisiana. Even just looking at it on a map, you can, well, I guess not, you wouldn't be able to see it on a map, but if you looked at pictures of both, you would see how different both of them are. And I think that contrast is kind of what contributes to Simon Thomas's personality, his contrasting personality, because it's just so different. Growing up in a place like Albuquerque and then moving at a young age to Louisiana, everything kind of changes. And as someone that hasn't moved around a lot, I've been pretty stationary my entire life. I can only really imagine what he was feeling and what he was going through during that move. But, it ultimately ended up with him creating this masterpiece of a game that shows all different facets of life through Zuma. Of course, the seven deadly sins, except for pride, but I would argue that pride is the most well-known of the seven deadly sins anyway. So he was ultimately, I think, doing a service to the people, because he's spreading awareness for one of the lesser known, or I guess 6 of the lesser known seven deadly sins, by excluding pride, because we all have a kind of an idea of pride, but when you get down to like sloth, to like gluttony, and those are topics that we will discuss later in the video, there's a lot that people aren't aware of, kind of thing. And I think even just by omitting pride, it ended up being more of an educational tool for the people, because it's like if I was telling you about like if I was going over like foods and I was like samosas, like tacos, and like rice. Like everyone's had rice, but if you're not from South America, if you're not from Mexico, you might not know about samosas. You might not know about quesadillas or other foods. And it's like if you're not well versed in the seven deadly sins, you might not know about sloth. You might not know about greed or pride, but you will know about pride. But the other ones, not everybody knows about it. But going back to his childhood, grew up in New Mexico, and that's just one of the chapters of his early life. I believe in, I forgot what year, maybe 1989. He did post his autobiography, and he goes into his childhood. And I read this at the time because I was really interested in knowing kind of what went on in his early life, but also what was going on in his head, because I do think Simon Thomas is a underrated, I don't know what you would say, I guess like modern thinker. He's not that he's on the level of like an Aristotle or like a Socrates, but, and not to claim he is, but there are a lot of similarities there if the more you look into it. So that's what I'll start with. But again, going back to his childhood in Albuquerque, Simon Thomas's dad was not around very much, and so he never really got to know him. But just from hearing stories from his mother, he was a very charismatic guy, very charming guy, and honestly, despite his dad not being around very much in his life, he ended up kind of being an idol to Simon Thomas in his early development. He wanted to be like his dad for a majority of his early life. And, some might say in his autobiography, he points out that in some cases, he still does wish to be like that, Like there are some traits that just are hard to come across. And those are all traits that were possessed by his father, his late father now, because his father did pass away in 2013. But he was a very admirable guy, and he wasn't absent out of, a lot of absent parents are absent from their kids' lives because they can't handle it. They aren't ready to be a parent, or they aren't ready to just be around someone that needs to be raised and nurtured in a really vulnerable part of their lives. It was never a selfish thing for, I believe his father's name is, what was his name? I think it truly is Thomas Thomas. You're not going to believe me, but I believe his name is Thomas Thomas. And it was never about that for Thomas Thomas. It was work most of the time. He was very, very busy. And he worked in Albuquerque at a factory, and he was one of the factory leads. And a lot of factory work that happens now, like all the Amazon warehouse jokes and stuff, that was really the reality of being a factory worker in the 60s and 70s in Albuquerque. There was lots of corruption, but also just really bad working environments. Not very many breaks. These guys worked long hours with little breaks, and they didn't even make much pay. But due to the job state at the time, there was not much else that he could do, Thomas Thomas. So he ended up having to be absent from his son's life, and he did say in 2009, when he I forgot what award he won, but he won some type of award similar to a Nobel Peace Prize, but not actually a Nobel Peace Prize. It was just a general prize for being a good person. The name is missing me at the moment. But he said throughout his life, he had many regrets, and the thing he regretted most was not being able to be a better father. And that is, it's heartbreaking to hear, because the two did have such a great relationship, father and son, Thomas and Simon. And I can't really comment on it in full because I've never been in a similar position, so I don't even know what to say almost. But it is interesting to note that was the relationship they had. It was a very close relationship, and Simon wanted to be like Thomas in a lot of ways. And one of the biggest compliments Simon said he ever got was his mother. I believe it was in 2014, after his father had already passed. His mother told him something that he said he forgot the context of it, or maybe I'm forgetting the context of it, but he said that he reminded her, sorry, we're going through a lot of people right now, but he reminded her, oh my goodness, sorry, I'm got zuma on the brain. He reminded her of his father, and he said that was the moment almost when he knew that he had done it, he had made it as a person, because making it as a game developer and making it as a person are two very different things to Simon Thomas. He wants to be a good game developer, obviously, but there is more incentive to be a good person, and he felt that it didn't take him making Zuma to make him a good person. It took almost, in a sense, it was almost Zuma making him. The game kind of revealing to himself the person that he'd always wanted to be. That's what it took. And I think, that in itself, the creation kind of making the master there, or the creation making the creator, is beautiful. And I would argue it's the best thing to come from Zuma is Simon Thomas's inner peace, kind of, because, I can sit here and play this game all the time, have fun, but that's all it is, right? It's just fun. But when there's actual people's lives involved, it really is different. It really is an entirely different thing. And I've never had the chance to talk with Simon Thomas. I really wish I could. He is still alive, but he is very secluded on the internet. You don't hear from him very much. You don't see him very much online. He makes the effort to stay offline. And I think a part of it is just because of his his shyness. And I went over it earlier. The character he is in game is not him. That's not the guy he is. We're going to stage 3 now. Time flies when you're playing Zuma. But yeah, the guy he is in game is not who he is in person. And in person he's always been more of a shy guy, for lack of better words. And it comes across because I've reached out to him in the past just to I guess to thank him, because this game is very, very near and dear to me also, and it's gotten me through some tough times in my own life, and I wanted to be able to, I wanted him to know that, kind of, and it never ended up going through. It never ended up being really even feasible. He never answered when I called, but I don't expect him to. He's a very, very busy guy. He's still got lots going on. I believe he has 3 kids now, all girls, and he is more committed to them, obviously, than making another game. And I think that's fine. I think Zuma as itself works. I think it works as a game, even just like by itself. I don't think it even needed a sequel. It did get a sequel, but I think if you kept it at one game and nothing else was created other than just the original Zuma, I think you could still argue it's one of the greatest gaming franchises of all time. And that sounds kind of ridiculous to say over a single game, to claim it as one of the biggest franchises or greatest franchises, because you would be like, you got to have multiple games to count as a franchise. But I truly think that this singular Zuma game is it's so much more to so many people than some of the biggest franchises are. You look at Mario, you look at Sonic. I don't think they've saved people's lives the way that Zuma has saved people's lives in the past, and I don't know if that's a controversial take. I've seen similar sentiments online by a lot of people, but I don't know if it's the circles I'm in that's coming from. I don't know if that's an opinion shared by many people, or if that's just me being fed info that I agree with. You know, you can never tell with computers these days. You can never really tell what exactly is the popular opinion and what is being spoon fed to you because you know your devices are listening to you and they're trying to get ad sales and stuff. You know, it's not like they're trying to sell me Zuma because I think if the devices are listening to me, they already know that I am playing Zuma, quite often, or at least I was, and now I'm hoping to get back there, to that point in my life where I can have the time and just the correct attitude, because you really got it. Whoops, I was colorblind there for a second. You really got to have the proper attitude going into Zuma, and that was something that Simon Thomas made very clear. He didn't want. There's a certain type of people he didn't want playing his game, and he didn't outline what type of person he meant, but I think we all know who he meant. So I'll let you guys all, I guess, ponder on that. But we're all thinking of the same type of person, and I wouldn't want them playing my games either. And so I think that's valid for Simon Thomas to say, and I know he got into a lot of controversy about that. It was not a racial thing when he said it was not a racial thing. So I don't know why a lot of people made it about race. That comment, it was not. It was a mindset, and again, we all agree. I would imagine we all agree with Simon Thomas on that claim. But you really got to be in the right headspace, and there have been times where I've been in a Zuma mood, but I have not been in a Zuma headspace. You feel me? Because it's two different things. It's like if you're gonna work out. Like you. Let's say you have like an injury. I didn't know you couldn't shoot there. Let's say you have an injury. You could really want to work out, but your body might not be ready. I broke my tailbone. I guess I fractured my tailbone. I don't know if there's a difference. And I couldn't do any seated exercises for like 10 weeks. I wanted to exercise all the time, but I wasn't in the right. I guess headspace wouldn't be the thing. I was in the right headspace, and I was in the right mood, but I physically couldn't. And I guess, honestly, for Zuma, it is kind of similar. You can be in the right headspace and mood, I guess, but sometimes it comes down to are you physically ready to play Zuma? And you can see the way I'm playing right now. It looks on the surface to be a pretty laid-back game, but if I had a camera on like my mouse, you would see all the effort I'm putting in, and it's a lot of effort, and it's a really mentally taxing and mentally straining game. And the type of person Simon Thomas didn't want to be playing is the type that would associate that mental strain with the game and then accuse the game of being bad because they don't understand it. And that was a topic of contention, not being able to understand his work. And he felt that a lot of people wouldn't be able to when he posted. He was very scared, and when it ended up being received well by the general public, and it actually won, I think, eight awards in the first 2 years. I would love to recite all those awards to you, but I don't think it matters that much, and if I'm being truthful, I don't remember. But for a game to come out and be that popular when it was originally by the creator, even he believed in it more than anybody, and he didn't know if it would get off the ground. I think that is kind of magical, and that's it speaks to Zuma as a brand, but I think it also speaks to the right people got their hands on it type thing. If the game was mainly received by the type of people that Simon Thomas didn't want to be playing it, I do think we would look back on it a lot differently, and I think we would look back on it as a failure because you can tell by the gameplay, this is a game that took a lot of budget. And that was not something that Simon Thomas had access to. Growing up in Albuquerque and Louisiana, those are not very. That's not where you go if you're rich. You live in if you're rich, you go to New York, you go to LA. You don't go to Albuquerque, right? You don't move to Louisiana if you're rich. So Simon Thomas did not come from a very privileged background. He did not have very much funds. So a lot of it was, he worked with PopCap obviously, and he had to get those funds from PopCap because he wouldn't be able to do it himself. And so, this is a game that costed millions and millions of dollars to produce. And then for it to pay off and actually be a success was a lot of people expected it because just through the trailers you can tell how magnificent of a product it is. But a lot of people also just didn't expect it, and I'm really thankful it did go well, both for the well-being of Simon Thomas and just because I think we could use more games like Zuma in our world. But anyways, I want to delve more into I apologize if I haven't. I can't remember what I've been saying because this is all off the dome. I don't know how much I went to Simon Thomas's background. I guess I'll try to summarize and wrap it up, and then we'll move on to Zuma as a character, and I guess as a person too. Because Simon Thomas is a character, he's pretty one dimensional. He's the big authoritative guy. He's the one that goes like the oh my. He's the guy that says that. And that's based on his obviously that's a nod to his Samoan heritage, but. Yeah, so he was Samoan growing up in Albuquerque, and Albuquerque is a predominant, like Louisiana. The reason they moved there is because of how diverse it is. Albuquerque, though, is traditionally white, so he was like the only Samoan kid in a class of like 30 white kids, and it's just some like diversity is really important in an area, I think, because a lot of people just didn't understand him, and not like it wasn't that they didn't understand his accent or whatever. It was that they didn't understand him as a person because they didn't understand his experiences, because a lot of people that have never experienced racism could never even imagine it, right? Like you could never even really fully conceive it or its effects on a person. And so a big portion of them moving to Louisiana, the Thomas family, is because they wanted to be heard, kind of, because it really is hard being the only minority in a I guess society that is all very similar, all very homogenous. And so, and I mean, also part of it was just Simon did not like Albuquerque. I don't think he knew that because he had never experienced anywhere else. But obviously, his parents being born in Samoa, both of them, even though his father's Samoan, but his mother is white, but she was born in Samoa, so he is half. But he, as you can see by his portrait in game, he presents Samoan. So, like, that half whiteness didn't really save him in the harsh world of Albuquerque. So, where was I going with this? Sorry. Oh, let me just there we go. But yeah, so Simon Thomas didn't really like Albuquerque that much, and I don't think he knew because he was, he's very young. I think they moved to. I think he was 8 when he was 8. They moved to Louisiana, but he obviously living in Albuquerque his entire life, he didn't know anything else. He didn't know that he didn't like it, right? So he had nothing to compare it to. But his parents knew that he would appreciate something else because they could tell that he wasn't happy, and they knew why. His parents were very present in his life. His dad obviously less so because of his grueling, excruciating work schedule, but his mother was very present in his life, and she understood him better than anybody else. And when she died last year, a lot of people were fearful that Simon Thomas would do something drastic, because that's a thing that happens. Your loved one dies, and a big portion of why she died was the American healthcare system. It failed her at every turn. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, when years earlier she went to get a checkup, and they found nothing. So she was truly failed by the healthcare system, and a lot of that would have taken a toll on Simon Thomas, and a lot of people were hoping that he wouldn't do anything drastic, because when something like that happens to someone you're so close to, it's not uncommon. It's like it's a common reaction to loss, is to become very self-absorbed and feel like nobody else understands you. And it was really hard for a lot of the fans because they weren't able to contact him, right? Because he wouldn't answer to them, and he wasn't answering to his family members, and he was almost impossible to reach. So it was like, how do we help this guy? But I think fortunately, Simon Thomas is a very strong individual, and he was able to help himself. He didn't need the help of others. He was able to work through it on his own, and I think that's part of why he is to me, he's always been an inspirational figure. I think he's played a big portion of my life, and he'll never know that because I can never tell him. But I wish I was able to, at some point. I wish I was able to just if I see him in public one day, maybe I'll thank him, obviously. And I don't know if he would appreciate me coming up to him. But I think just for me, and even for him, I think it would be nice to get it off my chest and for him to hear, because he's been going through a rough portion of life lately, and I do think maybe it's selfish of me to want to let him know that he was there for me, but I don't know. But that's not really related to his lore. That was just kind of me talking. I apologize if that came across as off topic, but you know. Anyways, so his mother died mainly due to the health system, and a lot of people were not to say he was on suicide watch or whatever, but I mean, he kind of was. You gotta look out for people in those situations, because it's a very difficult situation to be in. And when you have someone that's notoriously quiet and doesn't really share their personal lives in a tough situation like that, things can happen. And so precautionarily, he was placed on suicide watch. And it's been a year, and the only thing he said in public since then, because he's a very offline guy. Literally the only thing he said, and he said it in an interview, and it was this April, and so I was very happy to hear this, is he said that he was very appreciative of everyone being there for him, he also said that he apologized for not being more transparent, I guess, with what he was feeling, and in the future he vowed to, at least with his loved ones, to be more transparent with them and let them know, because they all wanted to be there for him, but it was very hard for them because he wasn't really letting them be there for him, type thing, So he did make a statement about that, but then what he also said was that for the foreseeable future, this won't be an issue again. He's very happy. He has he has a wife. He has 3 children. He said that leaving them was never an option. That was never on the table. So he was appreciative of everybody for their kind words and for their help. But he said, "Don't worry, this isn't going to be a reoccurring issue. Everybody kind of just worry about themselves, and I'll take care of myself. And I have a wife that's going to take care of me, because he has to take care of his kids." That was his main statement, and I think that kind of a lot of people sighed in relief there, because we all knew that obviously he cared deeply for his family, but his wife wasn't with him in the early days. She wasn't with him pre-Zuma. They actually got married 2 years after. They met before Zuma, so she wasn't there for the money necessarily. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on that. It would be disrespectful to speculate that his wife's a gold digger or whatever. I think a lot of people do that online. I'm tired of seeing it, kind of, because I think it's just disrespectful to his family and to him. Because I think if I was married, I would want people staying out of my life. And if I saw people accusing my loving wife of being a gold digger, I would not be very appreciative. So I think that's kind of a general PSA. I think everybody just stay out of his life. But he said that you never got to worry about that again, because he has a support system, and now he is more open to using it, because in the past it kind of went unused, and that was what a lot of us needed to hear. And I'm really happy for both him and for the legacy he's created, that he didn't end on such a low point, because when he got into, I shouldn't say it like it's general knowledge, because this is actually a little bit more obscure in the Zuma fan base. He got into a very bad car crash, Simon Thomas, in 2008. It was during the recession, and he was drunk. He shouldn't have been driving, and he went on to apologize about this. But honestly, a lot of people haven't forgiven him for drunk driving, because nobody got hurt except for himself. But he crashed into a lamppost, and he got very, very very hurt. They had to all of his front teeth, I believe the front 8 on his top and the front 6 on his bottom, went right into the dashboard, and they shattered. So he wears dentures now, because he's an older guy, and he was it costs so much to get I guess convincing. We can't really even do anything with those right now. To get convincing fake teeth, and he's like, I'm 60 something. I'm not even gonna live very much longer after this anyway. I'm not gonna waste my money on realistic fake teeth that aren't dentures, that are permanently in. So he wears dentures now. But that was right after Zuma 2 came out, or Zuma Revenge, I think it's called. So a lot of people were like, obviously it would have been, oh look, he's talking. This is really, really, because this is what I was talking about before. This is not like him at all. This is him. This is his face. This is not him at all. And Zuma, obviously, he's mute, but they had to put something, because they were getting in a bit of trouble with Nintendo because of the character Link, the titular hero. I guess he's not really titular because it's called The Legend of Zelda, not The Legend of Link. But they they didn't want there to be another silent protagonist, because of, confusion, because he does look pretty similar to Link. So they had to make him speak, even though at this point in time, I forgot when this game released, it might have been 2001. Zuma was illiterate, or it's not illiterate, sorry, he was mute by then. He can still read, but he had lost his ability to speak by that point. But they had to put something in. So in a way, this is almost as much not like Zuma as this is like not like Simon. I guess not, because he really is just saying frog speak. But I'll read it out loud first. Interloper of puny, you suppose the secret of Zuma is it possible to it is possible to take the knowing so easily? No, there is defect for your thinking. A cryptic hidden nature cannot be discovered so directly. 3 mystery shrines protect method. Never you will strike past them. That is, like I was going over earlier, that is very imposing, very, very frightening, but that is not like Simon at all. And I don't know how much of that was like not a power fantasy, but, I think he might have written himself this way because this is the person he wants to be. Because this is, truthfully, this is more like his father than it is like him. And throughout all of his life, he wanted to be like his father. And I think that might be part of it. But anyways, back to what I was talking about. It was right after Zuma 2 came out, and that game came out to critical acclaim. It was, it was Game of the Year. And at that point, he was coming off of being Times Magazine's Person of the Year in 2006. So a lot of people were like, if he were to have to go at some point, a lot of people, and this was last year, with the suicide scare, a lot of people were like, I think I would have rather him gone then, because it's better to go out on top than to go out at the bottom type thing, right? So that's what a lot of people were thinking, and I honestly kind of agree. I feel like if I was in his position, I would. Oh, look, there's a new color. Unless I'm lying, I might be lying. I'm sorry, I don't remember it pink, but yeah. So a lot of people, and I kind of shared. I didn't make a public stance on this because I have been in the past a very very known speaker on the issues of Zuma, because I've kind of found myself in a place in the community where I have a voice, and I've used it on occasion. I didn't make a stance on this because I don't know what Simon would have thought about it, and I don't think it should be fair for me to speculate, if that makes sense. So that was kind of my take on the whole thing. But a lot of people were saying that if he were to go, he probably himself would have rather gone out of the top than at the bottom of his life. And so I was thankful, and most people were thankful that he was able to get through it, because he deserves. I don't know if there is another high to that extent coming in his life, but he deserves to end on a higher note than he did, than he would have if he died in like January of this year or whatever. But that's kind of all I really have to say about Simon. I might go back talking about him a little bit later, because his story does intertwine with Zuma. Obviously, they had to meet somehow, right? So there is a little bit of interest there, or a little bit interesting things going on over there. But yeah, so Zuma as a frog, he's depicted as a frog, but he is actually a real human, and he was kind of a drug user. I guess I'll say that. I'll say it like that because it's a polite way of saying it. But he was you could argue a drug abuser. I won't make a personal stance, but he did use a lot of drugs. And the one that he said he connected with most back when he was able to speak was LSD. And so he would I don't know if you know how LSD works, but it kind of a lot of people that use it say that it's like almost an out of body experience. And there's a lot of similar experiences shared across people that have taken it, and one of them is they're called machine elves, and you could look up a picture. This is widely known. If you look up a picture of machine elves, this is a thing that a lot of LSD users see, like when they do LSD, like it's like the most common thing that people see, I would say. Maybe not the most common, but when I tried it last year because I was like, well, I want to know what Zuma saw that made him go mute type thing. Well, that's kind of a bit of a spoiler, but I wanted to know what Zuma had seen, and I saw them myself. I saw the machine elves, and it was an eye-opening experience, and it truly felt, for at some points it felt like an out-of-body experience, and it was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And not to say I get it, not I mean like in terms of like his like drug use, not to say I get it, but like I kind of do a little bit, you know. I don't know if that's ridiculous to say, but I understand him. I feel like I understand him better than I did before. Sorry. There's lots of voices outside my room, but I feel like I understand him better than I did before, and it's purely because I went out of my way to try to experience it. But I do think it was a very interesting experience, and I wouldn't recommend it. You know, I wouldn't like tell you to go try it, but you know, you could. Yeah, if you're open to the idea, I would say try it because of it really is just so different. But the what I'm trying to say here is he saw the machine elves and they spoke to him a lot, and he's written a lot of this down because he can't speak anymore, but he's written a lot about what the machine elves talked to him about, and they would have very very very, I guess I would say, important conversations to him, because it got to the point where he was using LSD just so that he could go back and talk to them. Like I think there was like a period where it's been documented that he did it like every day for like 3 weeks, and it was purely just so that he could go back and see them and talk to them, because he felt so close to them, and it was a closeness that he could never really replicate, even with his later relationship with Simon Thomas and with his relationship with his parents and family and friends. It was just nothing ever really came close to him, to that experience for him, like that level of closeness. And that is partially sad that he never was able to find, you know, he's not married. Zuma was never married, and at this rate he's getting older. He's probably in his 50s, and he hasn't found anybody. And so, not to say that he will never get married, but it is a distinct possibility, and it really is terrible that that might be the strongest connection he ever has in his life. And now being I think he's at least a decade sober. I don't know how many years, maybe, probably like 11 or 12. Being around a decade sober now, he's never going to be able to go back there. But one thing that he wrote about that the machine elves talked to him a lot about was, for some reason, Louisiana, and he found a lot of like solace in the fact that the place that they were talking to him about was real, because if it was somewhere that didn't exist, he never would have had the opportunity to go there, right? Like if it was like a fictional island or something, or like an area that doesn't exist, he would never be able to go there. But because Louisiana is a real place, he ended up visiting, and that's when he met Simon Thomas, when they were both Zuma was younger than Simon Thomas. Simon Thomas was probably in his late 20s, but Zuma was like in his he was probably either 19 or 20 at the time. So it was not a power imbalance or anything. Simon has never really had those in his life, but it was like it was an odd relationship at first, because Simon had never really had a friend that was younger than him by such a substantial amount, and he kind of tried to depict that power imbalance in the game, I think, which, you know, with the scene we just saw, with him talking to Zuma. I think that's almost a representation of their first meeting, and they met, I think in the 90s probably, right? I don't know how the timeline exactly works, but they met in the 90s. I'll say, I don't know if that's true. I'm sorry. You can fact check me in the comments if that's true or not. But they met in the 90s, and off the bat, Simon could tell something was kind of wrong with him. Not to be rude or whatever, but you can usually tell when someone is abusing hardcore drugs on a nightly basis, I would say. I don't know if that's just me, but I can usually tell. And I think, oh, that was a big explosion. I think most people can usually tell. is the thing too. So that was a point of contention for their for their early meetings. Simon was trying to help him out and get him off of whatever substances he was on, because it was more than LSD. I'm blanking what they are right now, but he was also on a variety of substances too. And so eventually, not by the time that Zuma came out, he was still very much abusing drugs, and even after Zuma 2 came out, he still was very much abusing drugs. It took all the way to like probably like 2013, 2014 for him to finally succeed. And that was around, I believe I said that's around when Thomas died. And a large part of him getting off of those drugs was he was doing it for Simon Thomas, because he was going through such a rough time, and he wanted to be there for him the way that Simon Thomas had been there for Zuma his entire life, pretty much, like from the point he was 19, and he's like in his 50s now, so for the majority of his life he's been there, type thing. So he wanted to kind of repay him, and that was his way of doing so. And he stuck true to his promise to never use him again, because he's never since used any drug of any sort. He doesn't even drink. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't even drink wine. He won't even drink like slightly alcoholic cocktails. He is like fully off of like everything. So that's great for Zuma, but it took a while for him to get to that point. More than he probably would have liked. But anyway, back to the original, off my tangent. So Zuma went to Louisiana because the Machine Elves were talking about to him, and I think a part of it was that he wanted to feel closer to them, and he felt that he would be able to do so in a place that spiritually they seemed to enjoy, because they were always talking about it to him. Louisiana, they were always bringing it up to him. So he was like, this is probably what they like. This might even be where they reside, and even if not, this might be a place where spiritually I can reach them easier, and then it'll allow me to connect with them better. I think that was his thought process, kind of. And it did end up paying off, because he continued to use substances, and he continued to grow closer, kind of, to the Machine Elves. And while he was in Louisiana, this is post him meeting Simon Thomas, because at first they were mostly just acquaintances. It took about a year and a half until I think they would truly consider each other friends, and that's because they were working at the same job. They were both working at a small. It's closed now, but you can look it up, and if you go to like the Wayback Machine or whatever, or if you look on like old Google Maps, I think if you go back to 2008, you can see the pizza place where they worked out together, and that's how they originally became friends. And then they went to game making, and then Simon was like, Simon asked Zuma to be the main character in his game, and what an honor that is to be the main character of a Simon Thomas game. But at the same time, it's like as like generally like acquaintances up to that point. Obviously, they had become friends at the pizza place, but they were only working there for, well, Zuma worked at the pizza place for I think 6 months, but Simon was only working there for like 4, because he quit very early to pursue his dream, and then Zuma quit once he was named the titular character of the game Zuma. So it was a really fast turnaround, because Simon Thomas had found his calling very soon after getting hired there. So it was a temporary job, to say the least. But that, I think, was the main thing that caused them to be what many consider, like, I think they both consider each other the best friend they've ever had. For Zuma, obviously it's if you were counting the Machine Elves, it would probably be them, but I don't think he counts them, because he understands now that they were never real. And I think honestly, you have to look at it like, why would they tell him to go to Louisiana of all places if not to meet Simon Thomas? So everything happens for a reason. I think the reasoning that you could come up with for that is the Machine Elves were kind of a gateway for him to meet Simon Thomas, which is truly insane. But that's why the lore of Zuma is so interesting, because a lot of it is truly insane. It's really, really interesting, and I hope I get to go over all of it with all of you by the time this video ends. But anyway, so they were brought together, they started working on the project, and at first, things weren't going very well, because they had the idea of the game, or Simon Thomas had the idea of the game, but he didn't really have, the means to work on it, and he also didn't really have like outside of the money, the creative vision was also kind of lacking for him because he could see and he could picture in his head how he wanted to like make himself look and how he wanted Zuma to look. And Zuma, he is depicted as a frog because of Simon Thomas's love for frogs. He himself was never truly as, I guess I'd say, in love with the idea of being depicted as a frog. I think later in his life, if you ask him now, he probably would appreciate it because he dealt with a lot of body dysmorphia growing up, and I don't think he would like to be depicted as himself. I think now he's okay with how he looks, but it is still a soft spot for him, obviously, because, you know, even getting over that can be very difficult. And then once you're over it, there's lasting effects. And I think a big lasting effect for Zuma is that he just isn't happy in a lot of old photos of himself until like 2010-ish. He like I think there's like 3 photos of him smiling on the internet from like his birth to like 2008 or whatever. So it was not a very good time in his life. And I think he would rather it not be depicted in one of the biggest video games of all time. And I respect that decision, and I think it is better that he was not depicted as himself in this game, just because of the mystical, whimsical element of it. I think even if you're removing the personal troubles from it, it's better, I think, if he's depicted as a frog anyway. Not to say that his problem isn't truly heartbreaking. And if you're going through anything similar, I encourage you to talk to people. That's the best thing you can do, is talk to people and make your opinion known, because you know, like Simon Thomas and his suicide watch spell, there are people that care about you, and there are people that that want to be there for you, but you have to let them be there for you. But anyways, so Zuma was depicted as a frog, and that was not the original idea, I guess, because he didn't like that wasn't the concept of the game, but the concept of the game was using the Lithuanian bowling rules to create a game kind of similar in essence, but different enough that it's not just a bowling game, right? Or not just a game with colored balls. He wanted it to be special. And I do think he accomplished it, because there's truly nothing else like this, right? Like, we can all agree this is like a very unique concept of matching 3 or more colors in a row. No other game has ever done that. There's never been another game that's been based around matching 3 or more of the same color in a row to destroy the whole row. And I think that was a creative mastermind move by Simon Thomas to create such a simple concept, but one that nobody else really since has ever been able to do to the same extent, or even in general, because I can't think off the top of my head of a single other game that's done anything close to 3 in a row, break the chain. I don't think anything else has come close. So they had that as the original idea, but they didn't know how to make it work, like they had him as a frog, but they didn't have him stationary until very far in development, or I guess not in development, but very far into planning. And it was actually the PopCap employees, or I guess like the higher ups, that recommended that. Well, I guess that brought this problem up. They were like, okay, so you have Zuma as a frog. Why is he a frog? And they were like, truthfully, it's just for visual elements, because why be anything at all, right? Like, why not a frog? So there was that, and then there was also like they were like, okay, well, he's a frog, great. What does he do? How does the frog coincide with the balls? And then how are they aligned so that 3 of them in a row would like explode or whatever? And that was something that required a lot of planning. But ultimately, it was a regular PopCap employee. It was not a higher up, and I don't even know if his name is in the credits of the game. Like, if we get to the credits, if I saw it, I would know. But he truly did not get the credit he deserved for his idea. Make the frog stationary, make him rotate, and make him shoot the balls, like like bowling. Like, how there's like obviously, well, I'm not trying to say like the person in bowling shoots the balls, like, cause like duh. But how for children they have like a little like slide for the bowling ball. You just put it on the slide, you line up the slide, and you slide it. That is what this is based off of. And the second ball in its head, so you can see ahead, was a little bit because Simon Thomas and Zuma during their breaks at I guess EA headquarters at PopCap, they would play chess a lot, and a big part of chess is knowing the next move and seeing ahead. And they kind of wanted to like put a little bit of that in the game, but a lot also it's at the bowling alley when all the balls are in a row and there's multiple colors. It was also just based off of that, right? So it's like a double entendre of an inclusion that I think is very cool and very novel. So there's that. As for like the creation of the game, and then there's also like the theming. Like you see these like skulls everywhere. That was not really planned until a lot later, and that was Simon Thomas wanting to put in his own Samoan culture. Obviously he depicted himself as probably a little extreme compared to how he actually is. If you look up a picture of him, he doesn't exactly look like one-to-one with himself. He gave himself a little bit more exaggerated Samoan features, but he does have them, right? Like he's not white depicting, even though he's half white. He's very Samoan depicting. He's incredibly Samoan looking, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that is like not like cultural appropriate. Like he is Samoan. He's allowed to not even appropriate culture. Like it is his culture type thing. But that theming and like the temple theming and like the Samoan theming in general was not an early addition. It was more so like we have the game, what are we gonna make it look like type thing, and that was like the last of the concerns because visually, it's a very simple game because it doesn't have to be very difficult, right? Like it's novel because of the gameplay and not because of the visuals. Like even like if you look at the balls aren't rolling. They're not like they have like they're not moving. Well, they're moving, but they're not like rolling along the track. They're just they're stationary sprites that move along the track, but they themselves are just that. They're stationary. Like the visual of this game aren't important. It's the storytelling, and it's it was the Samoan heritage mainly that and the inclusion of frogs because this is really just like. It like fully encompasses Simon Thomas's story and life, and a lot of people that don't know him as a person or as like just in general, people don't know Simon Thomas. They don't understand how like woven into the game his interests are, and that's something I wish more people knew is that this game is like so like utterly and truly just like him as a person, him as an idea. Like this game is like his child, and he's so woven into the story, and he I don't think he would have it any other way. I think he likes the way it turned out more than anything, and that's why I think it's very important that it ended up being successful. Because if this game wasn't successful, it would have been such a blow to him, right? Like imagine you made a game that encompasses like everything about who you are, like as a person on just like a human level. This game represents you, your interests, everything you love, and it performs poorly. That would take such a toll on a person because it's like the world saying that you as an idea aren't good enough, and that would be truly shattering to everyone. Honestly, that would be truly shattering. And so I'm really glad for both him and for the enjoyment of the world that it ended up turning out different. But anyway, going back to Zuma as a character, as a person, honestly, more so as a character, because his character, he doesn't do much. He doesn't speak, and part of that is because he became mute, right? So I would like to kind of expand upon how that happened, but also his life leading up to that point, because it is very interesting. He had a very interesting life and a very interesting story in general. So yeah, I would like to kind of go over that real quick with everybody. He was born, I don't remember the year, but he was born obviously 10 years after Simon Thomas. Around 10, it might be 11 actually, but 10 or 11 years after Simon Thomas. And he, from the start, he was very different in every facet of life, because Simon Thomas was less of a, I guess authoritarian's not there. He was less of a public presence. He didn't really have much going for him because of the way he presented himself. He was more laid back, more quiet. If you knew him, you knew him type thing. But Zuma was a very well-known guy. It's not well-known, but he was like in his circles. He was like heard because his opinion was respected because he put in a lot of effort to create, I guess, a situation where his opinion would be respected because he did a lot of public service and he was known in his community. And he came from, I think it was Rhode Island's. Like, he's from the States also, but he is a part of it is probably because he's white in a white society, and Simon Thomas was a person of color in a white society, so it was harder for him to make those advancements. Whereas for Zuma, it was a lot easier. But that's kind of besides the point. It's just a little bit of speculation. Anyways, his opinion was very, very well respected, and really, it was like that for all his life, and probably still is because now that he's such a famous character. But I think him being a famous character kind of takes away from his story, because if you look up Zuma, it's not a picture of him that comes up; it's a picture of the frog, and I think that's early on in his life when he had that dysmorphia. He probably would have been happy about that because he didn't want people to see him. But I think now, because of his such interesting like story, I think if I were him, I would prefer if people just knew who I was, you know? And I guess you could see that as selfish, but I don't really think of it as such, because for such an interesting guy with such an interesting life, to have so much of it be completely forgotten to time is really really sad. So I'm gonna do my best to shed some light on it, because it truly is an incredible story, and it really is heartbreaking in some ways, because obviously he met Simon at like 19. He was on drugs really early in his life, and it's because the respect Simon Thomas had for his father, Azuma never had that. His father was completely absent in his life, but not because of a rough work schedule, because he chose to be absent. When Zuma was 2 years old, his father left, and he never heard from him again. He knows his father's name. He's seen a picture of him, but that's about all the presence his father had in his life. And it's really, really sad that such a creative mind, never got to meet his father and never had like that type of role model. But at the same time, I guess you could argue that it ended up being a good thing, because it made him be the way he is the person he is because he never had that role model. So he developed who he wanted to be based on who he thought he should be, and not based on a prominent male role model in his life. And that is also hats off to him, because that is everything he is because that is truly him. There's nothing fake about him, and I think that's really admirable. But because of that, he is very, very dominant in conversation. He's very prominent in online areas, and he was one of the first, early adopters of the internet. And he had a little bit of a name for himself. And when he got into hardcore drugs, I think it kind of boosted his ego a little bit. Like, obviously, like I said earlier, he was never prideful, but I think he thought, I guess, higher of his ability, but not for himself, mainly for how he could contribute to the world. And that's why I think Simon thought that he never wanted to depict Zuma as prideful, because even at his most prideful, it was like pride for others, right? Like, it's kind of weird and like stupid sounding to say, but I mean, it's the truth, right? Like, he thought highly of himself, but it was in a way where he was like, okay, I can do this, but I'm gonna do it for the people around me type thing. And so it's a really kind of like novel, like, I don't know many people that were like that, or are like that are like that share that mindset, kind of, where it's like, this is everything I'm capable of, and this is how I can use it to benefit society and the others around me. And so I think that's kind of what makes Zuma both a great guy But I think part of that is what led to his ultimate downfall, because he thought so highly of his abilities that when they failed him, it was a very sorrowful experience for him. And this goes into his early life. He had a very, very close personal friend, and the two of them, she was a girl, and they were very, very close, and they were very close his entire like early life, right? But they were close in like a clearly like not like they were more than friends type thing, like Zuma and his this girl, who I'll keep unnamed just for his sake, because people heckle him about it online sometimes, because he still types. He can't talk, but he still types a lot. People make fun of him for this, but I think he's come to terms with it at this point. And so I just to be safe, I won't say anything. I won't say her name, but like it was like they probably should have like been together or whatever. Sorry, I think I might have just lost this game. Yeah. Can't win them all. But they probably should have been together. And what happened is she loved him a lot, but because of his problem with sobriety from all substances, she didn't want to marry him. And so she was like, I love you so much, but I could never marry you the way you are now. And instead of trying to change that, he got very, very hurt. Because I mean, I like that's a valid response, I think, to that, like getting hurt, because it's not a very good thing to say about somebody, right? Like, I really like you, but the person you are is not somebody I could ever marry. That's just really harsh. And I don't think he needed that at the time of his life. He needed someone to be there, and if she were there for him, things probably would have been different. But she was not there for him when he needed her. And I'm going to lose this one again too, aren't I? Yeah. So I'm just really engrossed in this lore because this is a very tragic story, and I want to make sure I capture it properly. But, so at his lowest, the person he loved most wasn't there for him. And he was dealing with substance problems, and that was the one time, really, where he needed somebody to be there for him, and nobody was there for him. And so that contributed very greatly to his problem, where I think she kind of planned it to be what snapped him out of it and got him back his sobriety. It ended up being, which in hindsight seems pretty obvious, the driving factor that actually made the problem worse. And so instead of, I think her original plan probably was like, okay, let's scare him straight, and then now that he's like fixed, I guess, like fixed is like a loose term, now he's fit for marrying. But that never worked out because he ended up getting worse and worse and worse. And so she ended up marrying someone else that he was also very closely friends with. And that just like shattered him. And that's kind of why he had to confide in the machine elves, because there was nobody else there for him. He didn't have anybody. His mom was not happy with the person he was becoming. His dad was never there. He was an only child. His closest friend is marrying another one of his closest friends. And they don't want anything to do with him. So he really had nobody. And so when he went to Louisiana and he met Simon Thomas, even though at first they weren't close, he truly probably was the closest person that he had, because he didn't have anybody else. And so it was really really sad, if even like looking back, like even now that he ended in such a high spot. And you know what the worst part is? After he got famous, she came back to him and she was like, oh, I actually wanted you the whole time, after he got famous. And so he had to I guess like be the bigger man in that sense and be like, I don't want you though. If you didn't want me at my lowest, then you don't deserve me at my best, type thing. And that is so hard to do because because of like how much he loved her. To like, for her to come back was really disrespectful to him, obviously, but also just like, respect yourself. You made your decision. You gotta stick to it, type thing. But it was just everybody involved like suffered from that decision, and especially him, because what it came down to is she wanted the idea of him, and until he was that idea, until he was famous, until he was world renowned, she didn't want him. So he spent all the time with her for like nothing, type thing. And that was very, very sad for him, obviously. Another sad chapter of his life. His mom is dead now. She died, and they were on bad terms when she died. So that's another like just looking at it's like truly a miserable life, man. Like his existence is like the fact that he's still here is like, people talk about Simon Thomas. I think Zuma kind of gets overshadowed because the fact that he's still here is amazing. Like what he's had to persist through is just truly insane, man. Like truly insane. And I don't know anybody else that's gone through like what he's gone through. He doesn't even have a voice anymore. We gotta get to that. That's the main thing. He can't even speak. He lost his vocal cords, or I guess I don't think he lost his vocal cords, but they don't work anymore. And he's had surgery to try to fix them, and it hasn't worked. But he was involved in Simon. I think it was what I said, 2008. Yeah, during the recession, he was involved in a car accident. But 10 years earlier, or no, 9 years earlier, sorry, in 1999, when the same year of the game's release, but 6 months earlier, because the game released in late 1999. I think it was in October, but it was November, because in May, it was summertime, and they were up at a lake at a cottage that they had purchased with some of the money from getting the deal done, and he was riding they're called Sea-Doos, and they are it's like a snowmobile almost for water. So he was riding one of those, and you need a license, and obviously because it's like pretty dangerous. But Simon Thomas was driving the Sea-Doo, and he was in a tube in the back, so he was tubing, and what happened was the tube, Simon Thomas was driving, and he was about to collide with I forgot what animal it was, some type of bird probably, and he abruptly slammed on the brakes, and the tube kept going forward, and Zuma was flung out of it, and he slammed into the back of the Sea-Doo, but instead of his teeth breaking like Simon Thomas, it hit his throat, and he's very lucky that he didn't rupture his esophagus or something. Like he could have very, very easily died there, but he miraculously lived. But because of all the damage sustained to his throat region, it was damaged so much beyond repair that they couldn't even put in another pair of vocal cords. It just didn't work. Like they could, or not pair. His vocal cords were so damaged and so disfigured that they couldn't even properly remove them to put in new ones. Or add a voice box. So that's the extent of his injury. He was so disfigured by that accident that he couldn't speak and would never be able to speak ever again. And they told him within a week of the healing process, they knew. They were like, we have to be real with you because doctor's code, and you're not going to want to hear this, but the injuries you sustained are so horrible that you will never be able to speak again. And he was at this point, I don't even know his age, he was no older than 24, knowing that you're going to live probably 60 more years, and all of them are going to be mute. That's such a horrible thing to have to hear at such a young age. And so that was, another contributing factor to, he revealed later in, I think, 2012 that he was depressed for most of his early life. And that's not really surprising, right? With everything he's gone through. I think most of us would be depressed if we had anything close to the life that Simon Thomas or Zuma, but mostly Zuma had. Oh, we lost that one. Can't win them all. But yeah, so that was just very depressing for him. And then, so originally he was supposed to talk, but it got to the point where all they were doing was the design to make it more Samoan, obviously, and they hadn't recorded the voice lines. And so they were going to record voice lines, but he couldn't speak. And Simon Thomas asked him, do you want us to hire somebody to speak for you? And he was like, no, I can't speak. This is who I am. If we mess with that, were messing with a core aspect of who I am as a person. And this game, well, he didn't say that he like wrote this down or whatever, but if this game is all about your interests and all about what makes you you, and we leave out what is going to be probably the defining trait of my life, that I can't speak, it's a disservice to me. And Simon Thomas was like, you know what, you're right. I can't do that to you. I can't do that to this game. I want it to be true to you and to me, and I want it to be true to everybody involved. And so the discussion ended there. They were like, okay, this character's not going to speak. And then when it got close to release, that's when Nintendo had the problem, and they were like, okay, well, we already have a silent protagonist for a game releasing the same, I think it was like the same month as Zuma 1. I forgot which Zelda game it was. But they're like, we can't have two vaguely green-esque silent protagonists competing at launch. We don't want that. And we have, our franchise has existed for longer, so we have the right to claim like the silent protagonist thing, right? So that's what they did. And but because again it was so close, I think this was really a month before release. Simon Thomas is like, okay, well we can't book a vocal studio. I'm not gonna do my own sound I'm not gonna do my own voice if it's gonna sound bad, because he truly believed at this point that this game could be big. Around a month before release is when he started to believe. Up until then, I think I said he was kind of unexpecting to the success of what it was going to produce. Like he didn't know how big it would be, but in the last month, he kind of had an idea that it could be big, and he was right. So good idea or whatever. But yeah, so at that point, he was like, this could be my magnum opus, and I'm not going to ruin it by putting in poor vocal lines. And so if you can't talk, then we're going to do like that screen I showed, where like with like the text. He was like, okay, I'm going to put text on the screen. And that way, I won't have to do like poor voice lines, and also, we can't make you a silent protagonist. He said to Zuma. So what do you propose we do? He's just like, I'm a frog, right? And he's like, yeah, you're a frog in the game. He's like, make me say ribbit. So that's what they did. And you saw it yourselves. I'm really happy we got to that point in the game, because that is not one of the biggest stories of like the game's creation, but it is one of the most important things, is that they were originally planning to do voice lines, and they literally couldn't because of his accident. And then they also couldn't make him a silent protagonist, so they had to settle for him saying one word, and it's just ribbit. I think if they could remaster the game, they would obviously like to not have to do that. But it is what it is. And the game turned out good anyway, so I don't think they mind too much, right? Like I think it ended up being pretty good. But that's the main story of Zuma, like leading up to the game, right? Like he had a very horrible life. Simon Thomas did, like, I mean, they're two very flawed people, and their stories represent that. Like neither of them really have had much to be happy about their entire lives, except for the success of this game. And I couldn't think of like more deserving people to experience that success, because their lives are truly full of so much sorrow at times. And it really is like, it's nice that they caught a break with the release of the first game and the second game. I don't currently own Zuma 2, but I can do a bit of a deep dive into Zuma 2. There's less I would say visibly less passion in the game, because they had already had the formula. So they knew what they were going to do. So the story of making it is less interesting, because it was already kind of like finalized what the game would be beforehand, if that makes sense. So like, there's less of a story and there's less passion involved. But even just having the game being able to exist, like, I think that was very helpful for both of them as people, because it's like, again, if you look up Simon Thomas, you look up Zuma, you see their characters, and Simon Thomas more so now that he's been around for so long, and he's been like, he doesn't say very much, but he's been around for so long, and now that he is recognized as the guy responsible for like the creation of Zuma, he's kind of gotten a bit of flowers for that. Zuma has never gotten those flowers. So this really is, like, this right here is like the peak of his life almost. And not to say it's a bad peak, because clearly this is one of the best games to ever exist, but having the peak of your life be fictional is something that a lot of people would not be ready to deal with. And so it was hard for them. It was very hard for them. But they had to learn to adapt and learn to be thankful, because even if you're only famous as like a cartoon frog, there are people out there that would kill to be as famous as either of these guys are. And so they're aware of that, they're thankful for that, but at the same time it's like, you know, you can still be famous and unhappy, right? You can still be famous and not have a good life, and that they've exemplified that throughout their lives. So yeah, I don't think it's particularly novel to say that, but it is true. And so Zuma 2 was less of a passion project and more of a how can we replicate the success, because truthfully, this is how we're going to be remembered. So we may as well be remembered in a good light, right? That's kind of what was the motivating factor there. And I do think it ended up working, because Zuma 2 is not as good as the original, but I mean, not many games can really replicate the charm of the original. A lot of people like the lore of this one better, just because when you understand it, it is when you understand like all of Simon Thomas, it's like if you watched like the final episode of a show, but you didn't understand the show. Like you only watched the last episode. And let's just say for the sake, it's like a good final episode. I don't know, not many shows have like a really great finale. Maybe like the finale of like Breaking Bad. It's like if you watch the finale, like playing Zuma, but not knowing about Simon Thomas, is kind of like if you watched the finale of Breaking Bad, and that was your entire experience. But learning about Simon Thomas's life kind of is like the driving factor of like Zuma lore almost. So like learning about that really makes the game that much more special, because like, oh, that was a good combo there. Like it is the context. It's all of the context. So when you have that context, it truly is a masterpiece of a game. And so if you went into Zuma 1 and 2 and both of them you had no context, then there's an argument to be made that like just baseline Zuma 2 with no context has better lore than Zuma 1. But as soon as you start adding that context, it's like it's not even close, because this game is a accumulation of a man's life, of his ups and downs, and it's really beautiful for that. Right? Like there's not much left to be desired. And there's all the special endings. I don't know if I don't because I haven't played in a while. I'm not playing to the best of my ability. I've gotten a few nice combos here and there, but I don't think I'm gonna have enough points to unlock any of the secret endings. But some of the secret endings are just so beautiful. Like they do so much without Simon Thomas even really having anybody to talk to, because Zuma can't talk obviously in the scenes, because that was one of the agreements they made. So like all it really is like Simon Thomas kind of almost breaking the fourth wall, and he's talking to Zuma, but he's talking truly to the guy playing the game, to the guy or girl playing the game. He's talking to the audience of his work, and it really is beautiful. I encourage you, if you don't know the ending. I assume most of you are Zuma fans to have watched this far in the video, and this entire video you've probably been reminiscing alongside me and like enjoying this lore dump of like lore that you probably already know, because I haven't done too many deep cuts. This is really surface level Zuma lore. But if you haven't seen the endings, I encourage you to check them out, because they're actually beautiful, and some of them are like gut wrenching, because it's a window into the life of a poor, broken man, broken down by society. In the case of Zuma, and for Simon Thomas, it shows a man who's like, his story is like just beginning. Like there truly is the contrast between the two is beautiful, and there's nobody else I would have rather had to work on this game than Simon Thomas and Zuma. His last name is Zazafado. Just to refer to him as his full name, because I've been referring to him as his nickname is Zuma. I wouldn't say his nickname. That is just his like first name because like they named the character after him. That'd be like saying Simon Thomas's nickname is Simon, but he's referred to as his full name more often, and I think because of that he like is remembered more. I wouldn't say fondly, but he's remembered more. That's like if your name was like Dan and like people talked about you as Dan. Like there's lots of Dans. If you remembered as Dan, then like you're not gonna be remembered as much, right? Like I don't know if that's a good comparison, but it kind of gets my point across. You can see now we're on the sixth world, and as I mentioned previously, the six like six of the seven deadly sins are what these worlds are based off of, and it really is only in the post-credit scene that is told to us. And then when you go back and you look at some of the designs, like this one is clearly Envy. Like we can all see this is clearly Envy. The last one was clearly Sloth. Like you go back and you look at all of them, and it makes itself clear, but it's such a great element of the story that such a big part of it is like so inconsequential to the actual gameplay. But when you actually think about it, when you're actually like presented with the, oh yeah, this is what this is, it makes so much sense. And I think that truly goes to show the genius of these man's brains, because I don't know if I'd be able to do that, like make such a central element to the story, such a throwaway thing. And also I think it was brave of them to even hide that, because a lot of people don't understand the extent of their storytelling and their ability to like make lore, because they haven't even beat the game. So they see it on the surface and they're like, oh, what is this? You just shoot balls? That's not very novel. But then you introduce the external elements and it really is novel, but they just don't realize because their eyes haven't been opened. You know, it's like Plato's allegory of the cave, and I'm kind of like Plato here, and I'm kind of saving you guys. I'm kind of taking you guys out of the cave and letting you guys see is kind of what I feel like. And maybe that's kind of like narcissistic or like self-centered of me to believe that, but I really do believe that Zuma lore is something everybody that has played the game should be aware of, because when you look at the context of it, it really is special, and a lot of people just really don't realize. But I do think it is really important to know, and I'm really happy I had the opportunity to share it with everybody here, because like this is it's a defining chapter in the lives of Simon and Zuma, but it also is to me, right? Like this game kind of shaped who I am, because even just growing up, like Simon, his depiction in the game was kind of like a role model to me, like the strong Samoan man. This is kind of who I wanted to be growing up. And that kind of I think that's kind of intended, because Simon growing up wanted to be his father. And he kind of presents himself in the game as a figure of authority, similar to a father figure. It is like Simon is the father figure of the person playing the game. And he is like, it's like he's become his father in a way. He's become somebody that we can strive to be like. And that's just beautiful storytelling, but it's not even something that's like told to us. It's something that you got to come up with yourself. It's like you got to review it like an English teacher, because this game really is so deep and the lore is so deep. But I'm being truthful when I say that growing up, like in game, the way he wrote himself, it felt like a father figure to me. And I have a father figure. It was like I had two dads growing up, and one of them was Simon Thomas. It was truly fascinating. Just like the reach of his writing and the range of emotions he's able to make people feel, like kinship, family. Like there's just so much that is underappreciated about him. And he did write a book about Zuma, like the game. A lot of it's like a lot of like movies are like based on a book. It was kind of like different because it's a book based on a game, but it truly is my favorite book I think I've ever read, because his writing style translates so well into that form of media. Like a lot of movies, you watch them, like movies based on a book, you watch them and you're like, this doesn't really need to be a movie, or if it is a movie, it doesn't really fit very well. Like I understand what is happening, but only because I read the book. And if like it's a lot of them are like, even if it's like a good movie, like stuff like Jurassic Park, a lot the sentiment seems to be that the movie is good, but it's not the best way to enjoy the media. And I truly believe, I wouldn't say better, but I think equal ways to experience the media are the game and the book, because his writing style lends itself to both mediums so well that it really is like two different magical experiences set in the same reality almost. And I think it really is beautiful, and it's like characters you already know in situations you already are aware of, but it really is just like completely different. And I don't know many like I don't know many like things that are like the top class of like their like form of media in two different forms of media, right? Like there's some books that are like excellent. They're like really 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 great books, and then the movie is okay. Or there's like some movies that are like really 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 excellent, but if they make like a video game, like the game will be just okay. But Zuma truly manages to be in a lot of people's top 10 video game lists of all time, but the book is as high as top 5 on a lot of people's lists. And I think that is both like crazy that he was able to write like two separate, like completely separate mediums so well, but it also just goes to the storytelling of Zuma. And once again, that's why I'm so thankful that it ended up succeeding, because it really is just a story of Simon Thomas's life encapsulated in media. And so if it were to fail, then it would almost be like saying that his story, his like life leading up to that point, was a failure. And like I've spent like, I don't even know how long we're at now, just like talking about it and like going into like his life really. So clearly it wasn't a failure if you look back on it, like, because all this is like open to the public, all this is like widely known, widely accepted knowledge. But yeah, it really is crazy that he is just so talented of a creator. And I'm sitting here glazing him, but he really is probably one of the most important media figures to me. I would say political figures, but he's always just been himself. He doesn't really get too much into politics. He did consider running for mayor of his town at one point. I think it was in Louisiana. He moved somewhere else after all that, like after the game got popular, because his address got leaked online, and he didn't really want people to because he's a very very private person. He didn't really want people to like be coming up to him like, "Yo, can I get an autograph?" But they're like at his like house. That's like, it was really disrespectful, he thought. And I kind of agree that that's something you shouldn't be doing. Never go to like a famous person's house if it gets leaked online. So he did have to move from Louisiana, which really sucked, because he called it home, right? But he's still in New Orleans, or sorry, he's still in yeah, no, he still lives in New Orleans. He lived rural Indiana, or sorry, for rural Louisiana. My bad. Similar names. So he moved to the city, which was a big step for him, because he's not a very city folk kind of guy, but that was a big step for him as a person. And damn, we're gonna lose this, aren't we? Oh, never mind. Hold on, let me lock in for a second, because I want to win this. Okay, there we go. I'm confused where the balls are coming from this one. I think that's probably an allegory for Simon's life, because he was confused for most of it. But in these later levels, sometimes I gotta really pay attention and figure out where they're supposed to be coming from. There we go. Was there 2 paths there? I didn't even realize. See, it's just really clever storytelling by Simon, honestly. We're on 6-6. This is the Sunstone, and this is again just a Samoan heritage kinda. If you know, you know. If not, it's Samoan lore is almost as complicated as Simon Thomas's lore. So I'm not gonna really go into it. Also, if you're wondering by this point, why is his name Simon Thomas if he's Samoan? It's not a very Samoan sounding name. Well, I did mention he was half white, but also when he moved to when he moved to the States, I guess he was born here. When his family moved over, his mom had a more, well, sorry, no, Thomas Thomas. Thomas Thomas was not always Thomas Thomas, because obviously who would name their kid Thomas Thomas? He had to make the difficult decision to sacrifice himself, pretty much just being ridiculed for the rest of his life because his name is the same thing as his last name, because his wife, Shirley Thomas, had a white last name, and they decided it would be better for them and for their child to have a white last name so they would fit in more with society. And that was, for Thomas Thomas, that was a really big... I can't pronounce his actual last name because it's Samoan and I don't have the right dialect, and I would not like to butcher it. But his first name, because he was named after I think it might have been Thomas Jefferson, because his dad was American Samoan. His mom was actual Samoan, but she was white living in Samoa. It's very complicated, but he was named after Thomas Jefferson, so he had a traditionally white first name, and his wife had a traditionally white first and last name, but he had to make the decision to take her last name so that they could all live a better life, and then he changed his name to Thomas Thomas. And I think that's part of the reason why his son, Simon Thomas, respects him so much, because he was always making sacrifices like that for his family. And he truly is just a great... Like, the more you learn about him, the more you can see why he was such an idol to Simon Thomas growing up, because he really is a great guy, man. He really is such a great guy. And he did so much good for the world. Obviously, raising his son that would go on to make Zuma, but, like, just as a person, and, like... I don't know. There's not much else to say there. I know a lot more because I've reached out to people that knew him, but it's a little bit like a more private information. Like, I don't think I gotta go into like how he raised his kids or whatever. I think that's kind of weird if I do that, so I won't. But I know a lot about his early life and how he met his wife. Well, I can go into that. I guess I can talk about how he's met his wife. They met because he was from American Samoa and she was from Samoa, and during World Cup qualification, when Oceania first got a slot in World Cup qualification, there would be obviously qualification matches in Oceania, and for the most part, New Zealand always wins Oceania World Cup qualifications. But you know, if you're from like Tonga or whatever, you're gonna go watch the Tonga qualification match. It was a relatively new sport there for them, so it was a new experience. It was a cheap experience, and that's how they met. They were sitting beside each other because they bought tickets, and it was a relatively empty arena because it was a new sport at the time. And it wasn't, soccer, football wasn't new, but like new to them type thing. And so, is this gonna be some lore? Congratulations, you've lived still. It is possible to be the one which ancient prophecy speaks. It was sent in order perhaps to release me from wicked capture person finally. But no, namely, this was the story of the exactly old alive. You want to live? Now retreat. And once again, he can only say ribbit. But yeah, they met at a World Cup qualification match. If you look at it, I forgot the date, but Samoa won 2-1. So if you can go back and find the Samoa versus American Samoa qualification match that ended 2-1, that's the match where they met. And they made a joke because they hit it off so well at the match. They said whoever's team wins, that's whose house we can move into or whatever. Like that's where we can live together as a family. They hit it off so well that in 90 minutes they were already joking around like that, and it ended up happening. Thomas moved to Samoa to live with her, and then 5 or 6 years later they moved to Albuquerque, and they started a family. So I mentioned that there were 6 levels, but I was actually fibbing a little bit because there's actually 9. These 3 you don't really see them on the screen because this is very prominent, and this is very prominent with the face there. But this is like this is like a you don't really see it when you're looking at it. It's like it's kind of hidden. So these 6 are based on the 6 stages of grief besides pride, and these 3 are more of like a homage to like the life of Simon Thomas and Zuma, and you see they added the white colored ball because of the racial prejudice, how they felt, how mainly Simon Thomas felt growing up, being surrounded by white people. He was a minority, so this is like a role reversal. Now the white is surrounded by color. I think that's pretty cool. Like, and I also think the white balls should look pretty cool in general. They might be my favorite type, which, you know, not a good look for me considering the context of their inclusion. But they look pretty cool. Am I not? Like, I like the purple one too because it kind of looks like a Mew from Pokemon. I think that was also the reason why Nintendo, even in the first place, made a big deal about the silent protagonist thing, because they were like, okay, you got a creature that looks like Mewtwo, and then you're also gonna have a silent protagonist. Pick one of our things to steal. And they had already designed the ball. They had the ball designer design the ball, and they were like, well, we're not gonna make him redesign the ball. It's stupid. So we're just gonna not include. We're gonna make him say ribbon instead of nothing. And that was an easier fix, and that's what they did. So yeah, that's the lore there, but I think it's kind of fascinating, and I think it kind of also goes into how what I was saying, that this game isn't really a power fantasy for Simon Thomas, right? Like, he is confident enough in his existence that he doesn't need a power fantasy built for him, but I think there are flashes, definitely, where it's like that was put in as a power fantasy. Like, you know, he didn't feel like he lived a fair life because of the existence of him, because of him being such a minority, and so he took that and he made the people that kind of turned him into a minority in his game in the form of white balls. So like like I said, there's flashes where it like feels like he did that to like not really get back at people in particular, but to like, you know, because it's the story of his life, and that's what I mentioned. This is only the first instance of many aspects you can pick up in these final 3 chapters that is like about him, really, not about the sins, not about Zuma even, really, because Zuma has kind of had his moment to shine. You know, he's on screen for the entire game, but Simon is notably missing from the screen for most of the gameplay. So his compromise is, well, most of this, like, if I'm gonna be off screen and you have the spotlight, then I would like to have the story be about me, kind of. And Zuma was like, okay, because he was the one that like even dragged him in the first place, so it made sense. It was more of a respect thing, him saying yes, him agreeing, because you know, you're not gonna say no. Like, the guy made the idea of the game pretty much by himself. You're not gonna be like, actually, I want the story to be about me. Zuma was never a prideful guy, so he would never have asked for that. He would never have been like, well, can I be this, like, the driving force of the lore? He would never ask that. So yeah, it was pretty easy for Simon to get him to agree there, and that was kind of that. This is losable, this level right here. I wouldn't lose it easily, but I could definitely lose this one. Whoops. I might actually lose. Never mind. Sometimes you gotta lock in. And that really is, that's how life goes, doesn't it? You have to lock in sometimes. But there we go. I didn't want to lose. I feel like it's almost disrespectful to lose in this section of the game, because you're going through Simon's life almost, and if you lose, it's you know, how can you expect him to get through it if you can't get through it, type thing. So I'm gonna try not to die in this part specifically, but you know, if I do die, it just goes to show the strength that he has as an individual, because he was able to live through all of this. I'm definitely losing this level. So, can't win them all. Maybe I should have saved that spiel, because now I'm going to look very insensitive when I lose this level. Oh, never mind, I got a reverse ball. We might be chilling. But it looked harder. I was kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to do the Zuma Lord justice while playing Zuma, because it is a kind of a involved game. And I didn't want to make any mistakes, but I haven't, to my knowledge, made a single mistake so far. I also haven't been dying very much, so that's good. Ah, I was so close there. To surviving that level, not to beating it. But that one predicament, if I fired a split second quicker. But again, it just goes to show how difficult his life was. I think this is just speculation, but I think the texture of like the white ball is like intentional, because if you look at it, it almost looks like it's got like shining stars on it. I think that's like a social commentary of like, look at all these stars that were able to shine, and surrounded by these these colored people that weren't able to shine to the same extent because of the limited opportunities they were given. And if that is a commentary, it's a very brave commentary, because this did come out at a time where I mentioned for a split second before, kind of refuting the idea that he was a very, very important political figure to me, but he didn't really get involved in politics. But he made political statements like that, where he would stand up for what he believed in, and I think that's it's very important to understanding him as an individual, and also to the world, because if he didn't make those statements, who would have? Surely somebody would have come along and made a popular game that kind of addressed racism. But the longer it goes unaddressed, then the harder it is to address it, and the harder it is to make up for it. Reparations, like, how do you calculate the amount to be paid? How try to imagine society without the help of people of color? Like, how do you repay them for the suffering they endured for so long? That's a topic of contention in the real world, and it was really brave of him to cover it in a game. Because how do you cover it without making light of it? That was another point of contention, and it's like, I don't know. But he managed to do it pretty well, better than I probably could have. There we go. That was easier than the last time. Press T. What does T do? There's always little secrets. I'm pressing T and nothing's happening. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, never mind. I got distracted. I probably could have a stronger start there, but I was distracted. Oh yeah, if you're wondering a bit more about just the family of Simon, I won't delve too, like, I'm not gonna like reveal his daughter's names or whatever, because he's a very private guy. But he has a wife who he met. I mentioned they got married after Zuma, but she met her she met him before that. So it wasn't about the fame. It was like it was like based on love and nothing else. Hopefully. Again, I don't like when people insinuate otherwise, because you weren't there. You weren't in the room where it happened. How would you know? But Simon was, and he says she's very pleasant. Obviously, they're married, so I would hope that he would think his wife to be pleasant. And their 3 girls are around the same age. They're like, what? I think the oldest one's probably like 12 at this point. Like 12, 10, 9 maybe. And then, as I mentioned, Zuma is not married. I don't know if he's looking or not. I believe he's probably got to be looking, just because he's getting into a late stage of his life where he's in his 50s, right? Like, I think he's 51. I don't know exactly, but you gotta, if you're him in that scenario, you gotta be like, I'm running out of time to kind of settle down with someone. And I do think he realizes that, so I don't expect it to be, I don't expect him to, there we go, I needed that, to, like, be, I don't know how I'm trying to phrase this. I don't expect him to wait around, is what I'm saying. I think if he, but I also am fearful for him because he is someone who's jumped into some ridiculous stunts in the past, and I don't want him to get hurt. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but like I mentioned earlier, these are very important guys to the shaping of my life and to the lives of many people. So I really am hoping that he takes his time with love, even if he doesn't feel like he has much time left, because really there's no race. He's already like 50. Like, you shouldn't be having kids at that age because they're more likely to be born disabled or whatever. I'm sure he wouldn't mind adopting. He himself, he wasn't adopted obviously because his father left, but I think he's spoken out like he wouldn't have minded being put up for adoption, like if his parents like weren't able to care for him, because he's been an advocate too, politically at times. No Child Left Behind and all that. So, very politically aware creators, which is not what you would expect when looking at this game. That, on the surface, it's not that it's simple, but it's that the message feels repeatable almost, like anyone could make it, and then you look at it for more than 30 seconds and you realize this game is such a statement and such a love letter to society almost, that no one else could really make it the same way these guys ended up making it. And it truly is such a gift that we were able to receive a game like this at such a time in the world, pre 9/11 America, when it seemed everything was great. This is one of the greatest things about pre 9/11 America was the creation of Zuma. A lot of people agree on that, and I'm happy they do, because it really is just such a blessing to society. Dark Vortex. I'm running out of things to say, really, because everything else I know is like personal, but I do want to beat the game. But I don't want to reveal too much about their personal lives that I don't feel fit to reveal, right? Because it's not really my place to reveal some things. Like, there are some things that can be revealed, no doubt, but I think it would be best to be by them, because I've truthfully done a lot of digging in places where, not that I shouldn't have, but in places where I didn't really need to be digging. Like I mentioned, I have Thomas, one of his closest friends, in my phone number. I have one of his close friends in my phone. I have his number, and should I? Probably not. But at the same time, it's for this video is for preservation of lore, because how many people know? How many people do you know that knew all of this? Like, besides like hardcore Zuma fans. So I'm hoping this reaches like an audience that isn't composed of hardcore Zuma fans, because they would learn a lot, I think, about just like general society almost, like just how the world works through the eyes of Simon and through the eyes of Zuma himself. That blue ball is really close to the edge. I wish there was a fix for that. Sorry, I'm trying not to die. These layer levels are pretty hard. I'm not a fan of that blue ball sitting right there. Oh, it came back. See? That was almost like, sitting on the edge. Zuma did that for a lot of his early life. But there's just so much connections you can draw, right? Like I'm partially just joking around, but like, it's true. Like, when I joke around, it's true. Like, because their lives are just so interesting, and that's part of the reason I studied them, and part of the reason I feel so close to them, because it's like, Chris Chan is like he's like a really documented guy. Like, there's probably a lot of people out there that feel almost like a closeness with him because of how documented he is. You see so much footage of this guy that's like probably mentally unwell or whatever, but like, you still see all the footage, like, and it kind of fosters a relationship of sorts where that closeness is there. Like knowing he doesn't know about you doesn't really change anything, because you know so much about him that it's like it like bends like perception of reality almost. You can see as the like levels go on, more white balls are appearing. I don't know if that's I don't know if there's a message behind that. Obviously there's a clear message you could guess, but I don't know how that aligns with the vision that Simon had for this game, so I won't comment on it. But like, you know, you could kind of guess what that kind of means for us, and for him too, him as well. Here's a switchback. You will notice a lot of the levels repeat, or at least they repeat like the shapes of the track, which inherently isn't a problem. I think a lot of people wish that the later levels had more unique, like, I guess I'll just say tracks for lack of a better term. And I'm also on board with that. I guess I would have also appreciated that, but you got to understand the time crunch and everything, you know, like what these guys were dealing with. So I don't see it as like a negative, really. It's just like the lack of a positive doesn't mean a negative, right? It's not black and white sometimes. And I think people look at it as like black and white, like it would have been good to have more, so having less is inherently bad. I don't think so. It is inherently worse to have only like 3 groups of levels that repeat, but it is not inherently bad. That's my stance on it. And I made that public, I think, a few months ago when I made my first Zuma video. But, you know, it's like it's not a ridiculous stance to have, I don't think. I think a lot of people agree. Here. Again, I don't want to die in these last sections just because of how important it is to me to not make light of the situation of Simon. And I guess losing wouldn't be making light of it. If anything, it would be showing how hard it would be to survive through what he survived through. But, like, you know, it means a lot to me because he means a lot to me as a creator. And I've talked upon that many a time. But, you know, the more I say it, it doesn't stop it from becoming, it doesn't stop it from being just as true, you know? Like I just say, I'm trying to see if because there's some stuff I know that I mentioned from Thomas's close friend, and I have someone that knew Zuma very closely. Him and his I don't know what you'd call it, his romantic partner before the incident. But I don't know what is appropriate for me to reveal. I could delve a little bit more into the relationship between his romantic partner and her new lover. She was probably his closest friend, as I went over. The other guy, the guy that she got with, though, was also a very close friend of his, and so that was kind of particularly messed up for her to do. But that relationship also was I wouldn't say performative because I don't particularly know, right? I wasn't in the room where it happens. I don't know exactly what she was feeling, but the fact that she went to him after he was famous and tried to get with him again shows that their relationship didn't last at all, right? Like she made I would say a mistake. I would say she made a mistake because whatever she had clearly wasn't strong enough to survive the test of time, and whatever she had with Zuma probably I can't say whether or not it would have been, but the chance is a lot higher, I think, because of how close they were for so long. That's just my take on it, but I don't know if you're in a similar position. Don't like set like a don't do what she did, where she set like a arbitrary, you have to do this for me, or else I can't. Well, she didn't even really phrase it properly. Is I think the main problem. She didn't say, if you fix your problem, I could date you, or we could be together. She said, the way you are now, there's no chance we could ever be together. And that might be the same thing, But the tone is very important, and you're insinuating two very different things. Because she said herself that she could never see them being together if he didn't change. But she didn't. She could have just been like, if you change, we could potentially be together. You know, like, the way she phrased it, I think, was very poorly to begin with. If you're gonna give someone that dilemma of me or the substances, phrase it so that you know that they're for sure getting you. If they like, it wasn't like an ultimatum. It wasn't a me or the substances. It was, I can't date you because of the substances. There was no promise that she would have if he was sober. So that, I think, was kind of messed up. But, like, obviously just, like, doing it in general is messed up. But then the way she did it was even more so messed up. So it made it worse. Like, the way she went about things was very, very, very poor. You know? Like, that's not good. Like, just a blanket, like, what she did was not morally correct, but also the way she did it was so poor that it becomes even less morally correct. So, not that there's a conflict of interest there, because, like, you know, bad and bad doesn't make positive. Bad and bad is still, it's just worse. Like, she set herself up so poorly to be perceived by the public eye because, like, even if he never became famous, that probably would have gotten out, and she probably would have been outed as a terrible person anyway. But, and then I don't know why she went to him after, because if she truly thought that he would take her back, you know how pathetic you have to think somebody is? Like, clearly, no matter how close they were, she did not know him at all to think that he would take her back after the fame. Like, truly, truly appalling stuff. And, you know, it's not my business to meddle in public drama like that. But in this case, I'll allow myself to, because I feel like I have a right to speak on it because I actually know I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this situation in particular, because I know the context of everything. And also, when someone is so clearly in the wrong, I think you're allowed to speak on it, you know? I think I'll allow that. If someone is so clearly not in the right that everybody can agree that they're in the wrong, it doesn't matter if I speak on it anyway, because I'm not going to change people's opinions, you know? Like, the people that somehow think it's justified are never going to change their minds. And that's one of the things I don't like about debates, mostly about subjective things, is nobody goes into a debate with an open mind. And if they tell you they do, then they're lying. Because, like, when was the last time you've had an argument with somebody and they, like, changed their opinion? Probably a long time ago, right? Because people are just too stubborn, and they don't adapt when you give them the correct information. They just have their own agenda, and they push that, and that's really the extent of it, huh? Like, well, there's not much else to say on the topic. Well, give me all reds. I don't need a red. Put a blue over there for fun. Make it a little bit harder. The green, so give me reds. Thank you. Boom. I think that's 7 complete. Yeah, we did it. 2 to go. Although I've pretty much wrapped up everything there is to say. So I guess we'll just run it. I could go over some speculation, but I'll go over some speculation, not personal stuff, because I respect the guys too much. But there was speculation a long time ago that they wanted to make a 3rd Zuma game. And it would make sense because there's not many, like, I don't even know what you call them, like you know how a trilogy is I guess like duologies. There's not many, like, things that end at 2, because it's like, it's just a nicer, rounder number to have 3 of something. And so I think there were talks about making a 3rd one. And despite Simon saying a lot, like, post, like, you know, when the dust had settled, they've talked a lot about the game itself and, like, the story of its creation and stuff like that. I don't think there was going to be one, because I feel like he would have said something. Or maybe there is still one in the works and they're working on it and they don't want to spoil anything. But, like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, because I think I think it worked best as a standalone game, honestly. And I don't mind the second, like, the second one's not bad, but I just think the series worked better as a standalone game. And maybe that's just me who feels that way. But, well, I know it's not me. I'm saying that as if I'm not involved in the community. I know a lot of people agree that there probably should have only been one, just because it's such a, well, I don't know, because I think if the games happened in the reverse order, people would think differently, because one is such a magnum opus of creation from Simon Thomas. If the first game was less well received and the second game was the magnum opus, people would think different. And I feel like I'm included in that. I feel like I would think different too. And I think it just happened to be that the first game was critically perfect. Like, critically acclaimed so well that no matter what they followed it up with, sure, it would make them money and sure, it would help with their fame, but their catalog wouldn't be remembered as fondly. And I think that's more important to a lot of people. I don't personally mind. I think this game can still exist by itself as a beautiful specimen, and it doesn't even matter that there is a second one. Like, I'm playing the first one. I don't have to play the second one after I finish this one, you know? Like, you can enjoy it on its own. But for a lot of people, they lose a little bit of enjoyment because there's a second one, which I don't think is right. I think you should just be able to enjoy both of them on their own. Like, their existence doesn't rely, like, you don't have to play the first one to understand the second one. Like, the lore is, like, different in the second one because it's less about Simon, more about society itself, and a little bit more about Zuma because he felt sorry that he was kind of hogging the plot in the first game. But because of that, they're not really connected because their lores intertwine in real life, but the game doesn't really cover the parts where they intertwine, right? Like, the game is mostly about Simon in this one, and so it's mostly about Zuma in the next one, Zuma and society in general. So you could play the second one without ever playing the first one. You would understand it. Like, nothing would change. Your enjoyment would probably be the same if you, like, learned all the context surrounding it for both games, whether or not you played the other one. Because I had learned all this context and all this lore about the first one before I ever played the second one. So I know what I'm talking about because it literally happened to me. And I think it's fine that they both exist. I have no problems with it. Like, because it would be unfair for me to support a game that meant so much to Simon, but then shun a game that means probably so much to Zuma, right? Like, that would not be fair of me to make that assertion. And I lose here. It's okay, because you can't win them all. We only have 3 left. I think this is the lowest I've dipped so far. Down to 3, I mean. I've mainly been on 5 lives. I don't know if you heard that voice in the background when I stopped talking for a second, but that is that's not Simon's voice, but it's meant to be his character. Simon has no vocal lines in this game. Neither does Zuma, obviously, but Simon is not the one speaking or singing, I guess I should say. That is a voice actor. I do not know the name of the voice actor. Maybe if we get to the credits, I'll be able to share that with you. I apologize. I know more about the lore than the actual development of the game. The lore of Simon and Zuma's lives, that is. But I mean, mortality itself is like kind of a plot point in this game, because my thing froze. Because we don't live forever, and Simon is aware of that, and that's why he implemented a life system. Oh, my thing froze again. But yeah, that's why I kind of worry about the creators, plural. Like, I wonder how they're feeling. I wonder how they're thinking, because now that they're getting older, it's like, you know, Simon has a family and everything, and I know he like, Zuma probably goes over every once in a while, but like, I don't know how included he is. I wonder how similar their experiences are right now, because they're still close friends. But I wonder if Zuma feels that way. I wonder if Zuma feels he's still as important to Simon's life as he was, 2 decades ago when they made the game, 3 decades ago almost. It's an interesting, I wouldn't say conundrum, it's an interesting question for sure. It's one I don't think we'll ever know the answer to. There are some questions like that in game development, but I would love to know. I would love an interview, or I would love to just sit down and talk to one of the creators. If anybody knows a way that I could reach out to one of the creators, um, I would love that, so I could talk to them. At the same time, I feel like it would ruin a bit of the magic, though. Am I crazy for that? Like, I think sometimes it's just best left, you know, left alone. If I learn too much of the lore, then it'll consume me, and I won't enjoy it as much. If I know all of it, I won't. Well, if I absorb all the lore, then I won't have the fun of finding new lore left anymore. You know, and that's a big factor of uncovering some of this stuff is the most fun part. That was a good bomb. I don't know why I'm locking in here. I've already won. But I would like to finish the game now. You know, I'm so close. I may as well play until I die. What else is there to talk about? I mean, the World Cup draw happened yesterday as of recording, and you know, that's how the parents of, well, not the World Cup draw, but like the World Cup Oceania qualifiers. That's how Shirley and Thomas met, Simon's parents. So that's interesting. That's topical. You know. New Zealand obviously made it from Oceania because they're guaranteed. Now they're guaranteed a spot. Back in the day, they didn't used to be guaranteed a spot in the World Cup, like a team from Oceania. So it would just be like New Zealand, like a third of the time, if they could beat like the fifth best team in South America or whatever, and most of the time they could not. So that's new, and it's not one spot; it's 1.5 spots. So New Caledonia is in the Intercontinental Playoff. And you gotta wonder one day, could Samoa or American Samoa make it? American Samoa is one of the worst teams at FIFA, in like recognized by FIFA because their population is so low, and they're a lot worse than Samoa. But that division is like so free because of the lack of people and also just the lack of development in that area. Like New Zealand is probably gonna have a guaranteed spot for the next like 20 years. maybe that's an overstatement, but nobody else has ever won. So having the second place, like them having an opportunity even to compete in like even like just like intercontinental qualifiers, like that is huge. And so you could see a team like Samoa one day take advantage of that. And I wonder what that would mean to Thomas and his. Well, Thomas, I guess, is no longer with us. I was gonna say Thomas and his wife and his son. I guess the new Thomas family with Simon and his wife and his kids. I know they would be cheering for Samoa because he feels ethnically more Samoan than anything else. If you were to ask him what he identifies as, he would not say American. He would say Samoan. Clearly, I mean, look at the game. But yeah, I mean, like, I can't speak to him about it, and it wouldn't even happen until 2030 at the earliest is when they would have their next shot. I guess 2029 is when they would know whether or not they made it. But you know, if they were to make it one day. Oh, I made a mistake there, and that's going to be a costly mistake. 183, there's still a lot left to go. Do I wanna is the question. I don't know how long I've been filming for. After this level, whether I win or lose, I'm gonna check what the clock is at and see what it's telling me. Because if we're close to like an hour mark or something, I may as well go to the next hour, just so I can round it up. But we'll see what happens. I do wish I wish there were more. Well, it's not really that I wish there were more characters in Zuma, because I recognize that they are based off of the two characters they chose. You know, Zuma and Simon are very important people, like in the real world, and having more characters that either didn't exist or more people in the real world that weren't important to the story would kind of muddy up the narrative. But I wish they had more people that they were close to, because their lives seem so interesting that I feel like whoever it was or whoever it would be would also be interesting, and then there would be a third person to talk about. You know, they don't really have that. It really was, for a large portion of their life, it was just them together. Like, they were all the other person had. And that's kind of beautiful in its own way, but, you know, if there was a third person to research, it would, I would have a little more to talk about. I guess, talk about the Zuma book. The Zuma book, came out, I think, 4 or 5 years after the first game, before the second game. So the second game is not in the book. But it was very novel at the time to base a book off of a video game. And then when it became so critically acclaimed, a lot of people had no idea that that could even happen with like a video game book. A lot of people had no clue that you could build a world that works just as good in a novel as in a game, especially a game that looks like this. If you showed somebody that, because you could read the book and never even come, like, if I asked you to read the book and you'd had no idea what the game was and then picture the game, you wouldn't come up with this. The book is very different in that aspect, where it's very unique compared to the game. Even though they're both masterpieces in their own way, they are very visually distinct and not spiritually distinct, but I guess they kind of are. They have very different spirituality to them. They just feel very unique. Like they're based in the same universe with the same characters, based off the same people, but they're just so different, is the thing. But the book is it's a lengthy read. It's like 350 pages. I think like 27 chapters long. It's a smaller sized book just because they wanted it to be. They said they wanted it to be pocket sized when they made it. It isn't actually pocket sized. It's, well, if you had a really big pocket, you could fit the book in there, right? like if you were wearing like baggy jeans, you could probably fit it in your pocket. But I think that was just like a saying. Like, I don't think they actually envisioned it being pocket sized. It's smaller than your average book, and the font is I don't know, regular size. So if you pictured like the length of a 350 page book, you'd be picturing about the length. I don't know how you picture it, like the width of the book. I mean, like the width of the book, I guess, or like how bulky it is. It looks about as bulky as you're probably imagining. It's not really crazy. Like it's a lengthy read, but if you're interested, the time kind of flies when you read it because the text is regular sized. I don't know. It certainly is interesting, and there's lots of dialogue between There's lots of dialogue in the book for a game where only one character can speak, which I thought was really interesting because Zuma doesn't speak in the book, but you can because it switches perspective. It's like an omniscient narrator, I think is what you'd say, and so the narrator sees everything and knows everything, and that includes inside of Zuma's head, and that is the most intriguing part of it to me, because you don't like see throughout the game like what Zuma's thinking, because Zuma can't tell you what Zuma's thinking, right? Like that's the main thing about it is like it's a window into a character that you've never even really considered having a window into, and when you get it, it's so ethereal almost, like being able to understand Zuma for once. That's I think why. That's part of the reason it feels so distinct to me, because there's really nothing like it. like Zuma never speaks in the game besides saying "rip it." Can't speak in real life, But obviously, the book was his characterization in the book was greenlit by him. So it really is the closest thing we have really into his feelings about the production of the game and the world he's in. Like, these are things that we really don't have anywhere else, and that makes it so special to be able to have that. And that's part of the reason why I think the book is so critically acclaimed. But it's critically acclaimed like the game, but it feels so different. I think why it feels different is because Zuma is able to talk. And that's at least one of the many reasons why it feels different. And out of those reasons, it's probably the most prominent, because it truly, truly is something else. And you don't realize how much like you wish you could hear Zuma until you do, because the way he speaks truly is fascinating. And the window into his mind truly is just as fascinating as you would expect it to be, because if you look at him as a character, like, not that he seems like a flat character. If anything, he seems like a round character because he's round. His base is round. Like, the depth of him as an existing thing, like as a thing that is on your screen. Like, if you look at him, you're like, okay, that's a frog. If you play the game, you can tell there's more under the surface. But at the end of the day, if you choose to be ignorant, you can be like, well, it's just a frog. And the sad part though is you're not wrong. Zuma is a frog in this game. That's how he's been characterized. That's all he really is. But there's so much more to him as a person than him as a frog, right? So it's an interesting read. I would say if you've never read it, go to your way to read it. It's you can buy it pretty cheap on like Amazon. I think I got my copy for like $15, and it's I don't know if I don't know if it's a life-changing read, but it changed my life. It changed my perspective. I don't know if that's just me. I've seen some discussion online, and I've seen it's top 5 in like a few people's like best books ever list, and I don't know how competitive that is, because there's lots of literature, but a lot of people that read the Zuma book don't read much else, and they get into reading through the Zuma book because you're into video games. You're like, okay, there's a book about a game I like, and then that book is so good that it functions almost as like a gateway into like learning literature, and then because of that, because it's like the first truly amazing novel so many people read, and it introduces them into the literature as a whole, then they associate it with being one of their best books ever, even if they read something more novel after, because they don't really have I don't know if it's like nostalgia bias or whatever, but like they have nothing to compare to at the start, and then there's a tendency for things to hold on to their positioning if they're really high at the start of something. Like if you watched, let's say you were living in like South Sudan or something, and you were in like war, and you had never watched a movie ever, and you watch your first movie. Part of why you're going to enjoy it so fondly is the experience. The movie could be horrible. It could be a bad movie. But I think in your mind, you'll always remember it as being good because it was the first movie you ever saw. And that's such a fascinating thing to me. How it's like founder's policy almost. Like being the first thing can be so important to how you remember something. Like being the first to do something. Like the first person to walk on the moon might not have walked on the moon the best, but they're always going to be remembered as the first to do it. I don't know how you that's a bad example, because I don't know how you classify walking on the moon better than somebody else, but like you kind of get what I'm saying, right? Like hopefully you do. It's just it's really interesting when things are put into perspective, and I think the book is an amazing read. I don't know if it's top 5 books ever. I understand why it's on some of people's top 5s, though, is what I'm trying to say. I can understand why. Would I have it in mind? I love Zuma. So yes, but it would be biased, though, I think. I don't know how it compares to like Wuthering Heights, I don't know how it compares to like Clockwork Orange, or like, I don't know. I don't really like Catcher in the Rye, but maybe Catcher in the Rye. But it's all about perspective, really. That's most of life, is just about perspective. So, and it's a story based off of the life of these guys. So, because the game is too. So it's no surprising that it kind of mimics reality in some aspects. Oh, guys, we lost. Game is over. But I've kind of been done with the lore too. So I'm happy with it, I think. I think I covered most of the lore. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And that's it from me.